It's taken Suzuki quite a while to bring a quarter-litre V-Strom to our market, but this V-Strom SX now is finally on sale. Now, the reason why we are so interested and so keen to ride this motorcycle is because it is based on the Gixxer 250 platform. And this is a good time to remind you that the Gixxer SF250 won our Autocar Bike of the Year award. So we have a motorcycle that has quite a proven platform to begin with, but is it worthy of a Suzuki V-Strom tag? Alright, let's just drive straight in and see what are the similarities and differences between the V-Strom SX and its street naked sibling, the Gixxer 250. Firstly, what Suzuki has done is taken the Gixxer 250's main frame and made a few modifications to the mounting points for accommodating the new bodywork. The subframe, however, is all new. Along with no changes to the chassis, the fuel tank capacity also remains the same at 12 litres, which is a rather small size for an adventure touring motorcycle. The headlight and indicators are identical to the Gixxer 250s, while the taillight seems to be taken off the previous 155cc Gixxer. Moving on, the suspension, whether it is the front fork or the preload adjustable monoshock, is the same as the Gixxer, down to the internals and amount of travel at both ends. The swing arm, however, is new and longer, and you will also notice that the point where the front axle attaches to the bottom of the fork is offset to make it easier to accommodate the 19-inch front wheel. All these changes have resulted in a 100mm increase on the wheelbase. Suzuki hasn't done anything to the 249cc oil-cooled engine as well, and it is in the same state of tune as the Gixxer 250. Even the internal gearing and the size of the final drive sprockets is exactly the same. As for the ergonomics, the seat height has gone up by 35mm to 835mm, which is tall but still not as much as the 855mm perch of the KTM 250 Adventure. The handlebar is all new and the foot pegs have been moved slightly forward. And since this motorcycle is made for touring, you've got a decently sized aluminium top box rack as well as bungee hooks on the pillion footrest hanger to strap your luggage to the bike. This is what cost-conscious platform sharing in the automotive space looks like. And with that out of the way, let's move on to the bits that make the V-Strom SX the sport adventure tourer that it is. It's quite obvious that the design of the V-Strom SX is inspired by some of the bigger V-Stroms sold in international markets like the V-Strom 1050. But I have to say that this design has a nice mix of form and function. In fact, the first thing that strikes you about this bike is its road presence, its size, and I think that is a big positive about this motorcycle's design. Even the colors, like the bright yellow example you see here, makes the motorcycle stand out. The shape of the bodywork is mainly flat surfaces with a few creases, be it the beak under the headlight, the shape of the fuel tank, or the plastic extensions attached below it, and the tail panels. There's a non-adjustable windscreen that sits above the headlight, and it does a decent job of deflecting head-on wind up to the chest area. All of these design elements come together to give the V-Strom SX its own identity in the Indian adventure motorcycle market. My only wish was that Suzuki should have avoided fitting the triangular taillight as it doesn't gel with the rest of the design. As far as quality of materials and fit and finish is concerned, they are up to typical Suzuki standards, which is good. I also like the layout of the LCD display and the way it has been positioned, making it easy to read even when the sun is overhead. The unit features Bluetooth connectivity with the facilities expected these days, be it call and message alerts or turn-by-turn navigation. Given the limited amount of time we had, we couldn't try out these features, but we shall do so once we get the bike for a test back at base. Another nifty feature is the USB charger that's available as standard, but I'd have liked to see a better cover for the port as the current one is a little flimsy to use. Okay then, enough of checking out the bike. Let's get down to riding, shall we? Because one of the best parts to look forward to in the V-Strom SX is the sweet engine. This is one of the best 250cc engines on the market today, and the reason for that is its incredible refinement and tractability. At the same time, it loves to be revved And you have to remember that to access all of this engine performance, you will have to rev out this engine. And you'll never tire of doing so because of how smooth and composed the engine feels even when you're riding the motorcycle hard and fast. This should appeal to people who are looking for a sporty streak in their quarter-liter adventure touring motorcycle. On the other hand, the engine is calm at 80 kph or even 100 kph with the gearbox slotted in 6th. There are next to no vibrations as well, and that makes for a good highway tourer. In fact, given the gearing and high levels of refinement, even a steady 120 kph doesn't seem to cause too much strain on the engine. But anything beyond that speed and you'll feel the performance begin to taper off. One has to also remember that this engine has to move a motorcycle that's 11 kgs heavier than the Gixxer 250. Also, it'll be interesting to see how this engine performs when you've got a pillion on board and with panniers as well as a top box attached. That is a story for some time in the future. For now, and what we've experienced so far, this engine continues to lend itself nicely to the V-Strom SX's sport adventure motorcycle application. And so do the ergonomics of this motorcycle. I've been riding this motorcycle for close to a day now, and so far I've had no instances of fatigue or backaches or what have you. And credit for that goes to the really relaxed riding position of the V-Strom SX. As you can see, I'm seated nice and upright. This handlebar is pulled back slightly towards me, and even the foot peg aren't to rear set. But special mention must be made of the seat because this is really wide and comfortable and flat. So I have to say that this is one proper long distance riding position. But when you go off-road, you will notice that the bar is a little too low. So if you're a tall rider like me, like I am 5 feet 10 inches, and I have to bend down slightly to reach the bars. So this is not exactly an off-road bike, so to say, and Suzuki has been saying that it is not a proper off-road machine. So if you are a taller rider and you still want to go on off-road trails, maybe a handlebar riser would work. That said, there are other bits like the 19-inch front wheel and MRF Grip Meteor tires that give this bike the required ability and grip to ride down a light mud trail. In fact, with 205 mm of ground clearance achieved by installing the larger 19-inch front wheel and moving the swing arm pivot point higher, you'd believe that the V-Strom SX should be able to tackle more of the rough stuff. However, the limiting factor is the suspension. It is set up for road use, and with only 120 mm of travel at the front, you'd rather stay away from jumping this bike off mounds or climb over rocks and what have you. That aside, you can still have a decent time riding over milder off-road trails. But what the V-Strom is a good road bias machine, and the way it rides and handles is proof of that. At low speeds, the ride feels a little stiff, but as you carry more pace over the bad roads, the ride quality improves. As for handling, this bike feels very planted and neutral. Now it isn't very fast to tip in or change direction compared to a Gixxer because obviously that bike has a slightly sharper rake and smaller wheels. But this doesn't feel as disconnected as you would expect when you're riding a motorcycle with a 19-inch front wheel. The brakes, again being taken off the Gixxer 250, leave almost nothing to complain about as bite and feedback is available in generous amounts. The V-Strom SX carries all the virtues of the Gixxer 250 and bundles them with a more spacious, upright and comfortable riding position. As a road tourer, the V-Strom SX is perhaps one of the most accomplished options that you will find at this price point. But as far as off-road ADV capability goes, the 19-inch front wheel is about all it gets. This is not an off-road ready motorcycle, and it's essentially a Gixxer 250 on stilts and makes for a good commute as well as a highway machine, albeit at a Rs 30,000 premium over the street naked machine. The higher price is accounted for in the extra bodywork, bigger wheel, tires, Bluetooth connectivity, etc. But at Rs 2.11 lakhs, it undercuts the KTM 250 Adventure, its primary rival, by Rs 25,000, even though it definitely isn't as capable off-road as the Austrian bike. So, to answer the question, is this motorcycle deserving of the V-Strom badge? Well, not really. but it is a nice tarmac bias touring bike with all the quality and reliability that you'd associate with a Japanese motorcycle.